It's the one thing that you get, if you get perfectly right, can unlock everything else in your business. It's also the
Totally.
one thing, if you get perfectly wrong, will make everything else you're trying to do a complete waste of time.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Free to Grow CFO podcast, where we dive deep into conversations about scaling a profitable D2C brand. I'm your host, John Blair, founder of Free to Grow CFO. We are the go-to outsourced finance and accounting firm for 8 and 9-figure D2C brands. All right, today I'm joined again, coming back on the show, Kyle Hensey. Kyle, what's up, brother?
Not too much. Thanks for having me, John.
Yeah, man. So those of you who don't know who Kyle is, former one of the co-founders and CEO of Chubby's, and now co-founder and CEO of Good Day, coming back on the show to get deeper into the apparel game. E-com's hard enough, e-com times apparel even harder, and we're going to chat a bit about how to do so profitably and cash flow positive. Before we dive in though, Kyle, for those who didn't listen to the last episode that you're on, can you give like a brief background of, who you are and what you're doing at Good Day?
Yeah, absolutely. So co-founder CEO here at Good Day. We're building Good Day as a direct response to a lot of what we learned in the Chubby's journey. And it's effectively like we can build back of office operating tools that will help smaller and smaller brands scale like the big boys. And it doesn't have to be insanely expensive, and you don't have to spend a year of your life implementing these tools. Like we're in this like coolest time ever as it relates to being able to build a lean, profitable business, like just genuinely the coolest time ever. And
Totally.
I just consider Good Day one of the pieces of infrastructure that can help you do that.
Okay, so let's talk about the apparel game. So the apparel game is something I talked about before on this show and the other podcast that I'm a co-host on, the Ecom Scaling Show. There's a specific playbook, in my opinion, when it comes to profitable growth marketing and the apparel game, as I like to call it. Generally speaking, look, and everyone, there's nuance to this, but generally speaking, you acquire customers at break-even-ish or a small profit. And where you really drive your contribution margin every single month is returning customers buying new, fresh product drops. Because of that, inventory is paramount, right? New product drops are in large part driving your P&L, but there's a constraint, there's a risk, there's a trap. Balance sheet management, inventory can get out of control. When we start talking about variants and sizes, SKU count can explode through the roof. So we're going to talk about the ins and outs of this, talk a bit about how Good Day can help you manage this. But to start, Kyle, maybe you can draw a little bit on either the Chubby's days or maybe some of the clients, some of the brands you work with at Good Day. Do you agree with my take that, like, generally speaking, when you're scaling an apparel brand on e-com channels, you're roughly looking at break-even-ish or small profit to acquire a new customer, and you're making all of your profit on returning customers through launching new products?
Yeah, I would generally say that that's accurate. And I would also generally say that it's been evolving over time. And as these brands have been, in many ways, forced to get more self-reliant and more capital efficient, it's
For
become
sure.
more and more obvious year after year after year that you have to get really dialed on the repeat game, and it's not just an acquisition game. If I was going to be
Totally.
critical of all of D2C commerce 5 to 8 years ago, I would say we were just in the customer acquisition game, and we were all doing some pretty foolish things in all of the ad platforms. Now today, I would say most of the ecosystem is pretty sophisticated, top to bottom on the P&L. Now, like you said, I completely agree. There's a lot more that goes into being profit oriented in this acquisition and repeat game. And there's an entire other lever, which is how do you manage your business to the right levels of cash at the right moment in time throughout the year. And that's particularly hard in a seasonal apparel business.
Well, the word seasonal, I've yet to find an apparel business that isn't seasonal. They're all seasonal. And there's like seasonality in whatever product category you're in already introduces financial risk and cash flow risk. But I have seen time and time again that if you're an apparel brand that is seasonal, which is basically all of them, there's an additional risk because there's this seasonal obsolescence to your product, right? If it's summer wear or warm weather wear, when that warm weather evaporates, even when you try to liquidate that stuff in like fall, winter, people aren't buying. You got to wait till the next year. I see the same thing happen with like winter apparel. So like ordering the right quantities at the right time and not getting stuck coming out of a season with too much is like really, really key. Do you have any lessons from Chubby's related to that seasonal obsolescence that you can like share with the audience?
Well, I'll start with the first. I'll start with like the first principle that was very non-obvious to us, and this is like an upfront strategy question. Should the strategy around inventory positioning and revenue and profits be to be less seasonal, right? Like it's logical to say, oh, we're super seasonal. I want to be less seasonal. What we found is that if you're a men's shorts business selling predominantly swim trunks and you try to become something that's not that,
Yeah, yeah, for
it's
sure.
going to be really expensive to do that. So actually, it was the most profitable thing to figure out how to be really good in those peak time periods. So that was like a little,
Absolutely.
like we did that wrong for some amount of time. So I always share that. Like, if there's something core about your category or your brand that is like, yeah, you're like, really, your economics are going to happen in these months, I would really get dialed in those months and then figure out how to optimize the other months. So that's one. Two, oftentimes, especially for young brands, you can get married to your concepts beyond like what they are. This is really, you really have to listen to the customer and they vote with their dollars every day. And you might be really married to a concept. If you double up and say, I was a little bit off on the concept, I didn't quite deliver what I thought would work, or it didn't resonate with the customer. And by the way, I only have a 3 month long selling window. You might have years of inventory on hand
For
at
sure,
the
for
end of that
sure.
period. And so I think it's like it basically just like increases the risk when your windows are tighter.
Totally.
And then like the question is, what do you do with that, right? Like for us, we invested in inventory investment philosophies. We had a way that we operate. We would never buy more than 4 weeks of supply of something we knew nothing about. Like that was a philosophical thing we decided, right? Now that meant we left dollars on the table. That also meant we didn't find ourselves sitting on a year's worth of this product very often. And so we get a system that would say that was a winner. Now we'll start to plan to 8 weeks of supply for that, or 12, or whatever the strategy is from there. And so I think that's really important. And then you need to invest in the resources. If you have 5,000 SKUs and a seasonal business and you have 0 people planning your inventory, I think you're asking for trouble.
Yeah, well, okay, so you said a number of really important things there. One is you mentioned like philosophically, we will not purchase more than 4 weeks of stock of anything that we know nothing about. What are you saying when you say we know nothing about this? What you're saying is like there's more risk inherent in this decision, right? In the finance world, we call it placing risk adjusted bets, right? So you're saying, hey, I'm assessing high risk because we know nothing about this. One way that we like to talk about this with our clients is like the more uncertainty there is, the less you know, the more risk is inherent in said decision, right? We don't know the outcome. And so you're resizing your bet to align with the risk involved. But then you're saying the more data we have, then we're willing to place 8 weeks of stock orders or 10 weeks or 12 weeks. Super important concept that everyone has to realize here. But I want to draw this back to maybe where like what you guys are doing at Good Day, or certainly some connection to this. Where do you get the data from, right? To assess risk in such a high SKU count, complex, inventory based business.
So there's a couple exercises in the inventory planning process, and it's worth acknowledging we actually do inventory planning for some of our customers at Good Day. Like we utilize our systems and we automate a lot of things, mostly through Google Sheets. We're doing that because we're also building agents that will do this stuff for them in the future, right? Like we're dog fooding how we're going to actually build out these like more autonomous agents. But like the reality is, you can have all the conviction you want in the design process and you might be exactly right. You still don't know truly what the consumer is going to do with that product until it's on the site and they're comparing it to everything
Totally.
else on your site and everything else in the world. And so we were pretty strict with like, we're not going to take any sort of large existential risk to the enterprise based off of these like concepts that were brand new, right? Along the lines that you were just talking about. Now, what we would often do is say, hey, this concept is pretty similar to this concept here that we
Mm,
launched 2 years ago. And
got it.
so that's the analog concept. And what happened when we dropped that product into the market? Let's study the mechanics of that. Oh man, it engaged our repeat really healthily, but it was actually not very good for new customers, right? Now, if that was true of the analog launch, from 2 years prior, I would say don't bank on new working, right?
For sure.
Like you're going to even be more conservative than the 4 week like principle, right? Now we would get into it in the design process. We would say, hey, is this product meant to engage new audiences of people, or is it specifically built for the million or so customers we've acquired over time?
So key, so key.
And the answer needed to be where we think it will work for both. We actually never saw something that was electric for new fall on its face for repeat.
Yeah, that's
I
interesting.
thought that was an interesting idea, and in
That
reality,
is super interesting. The other podcast that I co-host, Ecom Scaling Show, my co-host runs a growth marketing agency, and he talks a lot about going through logically with your team on, is this an acquisition skew or is this a retention skew? Now, it doesn't mean that there can't be crossover. It's very product category specific, it's brand specific, but the thinking exercise, right, is what matters, which is like, how would we like it actually, you have to start thinking about then what tactics are you going to use in your marketing mix to use this skew to drive returning customer sales versus new customer acquisition, because they're not the same things. A lot of brands ad spend, right? Paid media, top of funnel paid media is what's driving new customer acquisition. That may spill over into returning customer sales, but in large part you're doing other retention tactics like email and SMS and things of that nature. And so asking yourself the question of how you're going to use this skew to drive new versus returning is really, really important, because there are different marketing tactics that drive each of those.
let me give you a click down into something that is analytical at its core because we studied the data to figure this out, but is actually kind of like a soft creative thing, right?
For sure.
We figured out that for us to like really drive scale and get the leverage of our networks and our community, if we were pushing ads through Instagram, Facebook, well, it didn't really matter across any of these things. The product needed to be visual, and it would be even more powerful if the product itself was visually compelling. So think like this is a pair of swim trunks and it has a really wild fun print on it. Like it will catch your eye in an ad, literally. And the same way, if you were walking through a store and there was something bright in the corner, it might catch your eye a little bit differently than something that was bland, right? Our argument there was like these networks are incredibly crowded and like you better have something that's really going to stand out. But even better if that same thing could visually communicate functional use case.
Mm.
It was visually looked soft, which would tell you comfortable, right? And so we had a lot of debate around like, we think this is going to unlock leverage in new because we're going to be able to photograph it and do videos of it in this very specific way that's going to unlock a couple of these mechanics that are so important for you to get leverage in these ad platforms. And then that would end up being the most profitable way to scale those products.
Well, I will tell you this. I was at Dick's Sporting Goods on Saturday, and the Chubbies section was very obvious to me when I was walking through, right? And I couldn't tell the difference between Patagonia and North Face, but I for damn sure was like, that's Chubbies. But I want to draw out something important related to success in scaling the apparel game profitably. You're talking about very intentional effort, right? From multiple angles on solid, consistent new product development, right? It's so essential. And it cannot be taken lightly. It's not like, we're just going to launch this. You got to listen to your customer, you got to mine data, and you have to be really, really thoughtful. It will make or break your P&L as you scale. And if you start thinking about the financial economics of paying for your CAC, paying for your ad spend per new customer, in large part, I've seen hundreds of brands' P&Ls and a number of them apparel. The way that you do that and continue to reach higher and higher revenue and contribution margin dollar levels is that you have enough returning customer margin to pay for that rising CAC, or at least partially fund that rising CAC. And you can't do that if you don't have phenomenal new product development and new product launches. But the trap is the balance sheet side of things. So like, talk me through a little bit of like some of the stuff that you've learned about managing the balance sheet side of new product development, and even a little bit about how Good Day might help with that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think even going back to the core of like, Kyle, you left Chubby's now 4 or 5 years ago. Why are you spending your time going at the inventory problem so deeply? It's the one thing that you get if you get perfectly right can unlock everything else in your business. It's also the
Totally.
one thing, if you get perfectly wrong, will make everything else you're trying to do a complete waste of time, right?
Totally.
And so that right product that resonates at the right moment, at the right price, and at the right cost are the things that allow your business to have the opportunity to hum. Now, when you think about now we're getting into the balance sheet. We're talking about cash and how aggressive are we going to be going into a year, right? Like for me as the CEO of Chubby's, that would always start at a macro question. I don't know. Seems like there's coming into 2026. There's quite a bit of uncertainty in the labor markets. There's a bunch of tariff conversation. We just found ourselves in a war. Like I have a lot of reason this year to be conservative on top line expectations, and I would literally start at a macro that's like almost that simple. And maybe your beliefs are different, but it would be something like that. And then I would go work with my team to figure out like what are all the things that are unique to us that might combat that kind of broader trend. Where's our unique edge, right? And then inside of that, we would be saying things like, oh, okay, if the overall revenue growth this year is going to be more modest, let's make sure we mix it heavier into repeat so that the profit dollars are heavier, right? We're going to have a heavy profit harvesting year this year, as opposed to a year where we're going full gasoline on new acquisition, right? Like that is an end-to-end strategy that combines everything from the macro to what you think you can reasonably achieve with your customers to the margins of the inventory that you're betting on to the types of products you're betting on because you're trying to engage repeat so deeply in a year, right? So I
Yeah.
would say what brands get lost in is they don't connect all those dots
For
day.
sure. Well, and I think to that point, and in the apparel game specifically, which is almost always high SKU count, tracking landed cost across, or let me say it another way, tracking potentially rapidly changing landed cost over a large SKU catalog, larger than other product categories that are outside of apparel, is like one of the hardest things to do if you don't have the right system and have the right data.
Yeah. And this is the unique utility of Good Day. Why would Kyle and team spend, now $15 million and 3, 4 years of our lives trying to make these tools really accessible to smaller and smaller brands and more self-service? It's because if they don't have these tools, they literally cannot operate day to day to actual profits and margins inside of their business, right?
Totally.
Now, if we take the tools typically reserved for, let's say, 100 million revenue and up brands, and we make them so simple and easy that they can be moved all the way down market, now we have a more level playing field. It's not that these brands don't want to manage like that. It's just incredibly hard to do so. And it is
Totally.
one of the areas, like, look, I'm a former brand operator. We spent half of our time in spreadsheets. I'm a pro spreadsheet guy. This is what you just articulated is one of the very core things that you just will not get there. You will not get there. Now, we have a whole nother layer that's arriving right now, which is like, well, I don't know. What about my spreadsheets in Claude? And, I can get a lot more done than I couldn't get done before. And so, we're working through taking a lot of the centralized, unique COGS information that we have and distributing it to unique ways that brands can get leverage. The easiest one is just take those COGS in a dynamic format, push them back up to Shopify every day. So now your triple whale numbers or the next marketing platform managing the contribution is accurate. The COGS numbers changing every single day without your marketing team or your merchandising team going in there and changing it. So we think that there's pieces of leverage like that we can provide that could be really powerful, not just for the big brands we work with, and we work with a ton of them, but for like we're implemented with teams of 3, 4, 5 people. And as I look
Yeah.
at the future of all these agents running around, we're going to be a huge part of it. We're going to build some very cool agents. But man, we want to enable these brands. If that's how they want to build, they want to be extra lean and extra profitable. I think that's a pretty sound way to think in this next 3 years of brand building.
For sure, for sure. So I want to take us now to another layer of complexity. We've talked a lot about the new product launch, high SKU count, right? And when you account for all variants and sizes and things of that nature. Then we talk about sales channel expansion, right? Like inevitably, Chubby's goes from D to C to more the channels than just direct to consumer. So you now have the complexity that was already inherent in just being a pure D to C brand now multiplied across X number of sales channels. Talk to me a bit about like how things become, I think, exponentially more complicated when you start doing that.
There's two things I always tell people. If you've already built a massive dearth of SKUs. I think at Chubby's we had a peak of something like 6,000 active SKUs, which was far too many. When you begin to layer in these other channels, the matrix complexity is pretty wild.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Exactly.
So I would just say if you're trying to find simplicity and you're trying to grow channels because it's the right thing to do for your brand, consider getting a lot more simple on the SKU base. Really study what's the 80/20 on where our economics are coming from. And let's get back to that. In general, what I experienced is our widest assortment was our e-com assortment. So it was not actually necessary to grow the assortment to get into the channels. I will say one of the most profitable things we ever did was go incredibly deep in the 20% of our SKU base that was driving 80% of our economics, and then expand that into wholesale and Amazon and the next and the next and the next. And if you were then monitoring on a per SKU basis where the profit dollars were coming from, you would see it just really slide into these heavily profitable SKUs, right?
Yeah.
Using distribution. So when you start to think about you're a single channel brand and you're going to add wholesale, right? It's easy to be like, oh yeah, now it's like twice as complex. Well, it's like, well, actually there's multiple business models inside of wholesale.
Yeah, totally.
The
Exactly.
big box retailers like to work like this. These mom and pop shops like to work like this. So it's actually like maybe 3 or 4 times more complex. And then the big question that or the learning that I had was our own retail stores. You're like, oh yeah, yeah. And also we do retail stores, but we have 5 of them. And you're like, well, does that make this twice as complex? It's like, well, no, you need to study every single one of those locations by the week to know what's happening in those local markets and make sure you're relevant all the time to have successful stores. It's like, whoa, now we just multiplied our complexity not by 1 to 3, but one to
Yeah,
20. Like it's a
for
it's a
sure.
compounding complexity that sneaks up on you. And that's why if you do that without systems in place,
Oh, no, no,
you're
it's
not
just
gonna get
like
it.
it becomes completely you can kind of like you can grind it out D2C only, single channel. Although again, in apparel, I don't recommend it because like the thousands of SKUs thing is very common and maybe not 6,000 SKUs, but like a large SKU catalog is generally necessary in apparel compared to other product categories, right? But like once you get to multi-channel, trying to grind it out in just spreadsheets is crazy. Furthermore, let's talk about there's additional dimensions of complexity beyond the SKU count and then like kind of the I don't know, some of the operational models. The financial model changes, right? You might have receivables now. And like you mentioned, some of those subcategories of wholesale, big box retail, they have certain average days to pay. The mom and pop shops have a different average days to pay. They all have different operational complexities in terms of like, how do you deliver things? How do they need to be barcoded, palletized? And guess what? If you don't do it right, big box retail just charges you back or just sends the shipment back to you. How much does that cost, right? And then you start talking about the order routing, the inventory planning, where you're like, you actually start going like, I have a demand plan for my D2C store, right? And I'm purchasing specifically for D2C, but then I've also got ordering for these big box retailers and I've got ordering and routing for Amazon. And then you start going, but I also need some buffer for each one of those in case I, beat the projections. And they all have different data sets of varying reliability, right, for doing your demand planning. And so you actually, at that point, need to have the right systems and the right team members who know how to manage multi-channel complexity. And I will also say, too, there's a science to managing sales channel level P&Ls, but you have to also remember that it is all connected, especially if you're digitally native and like you're still spending a lot of ad dollars, right? And top of funnel digital media channels. That's going to benefit Amazon. That's going to benefit physical retail. And you can't get so myopic that you think, and in fact, I think Preston,
Yeah.
one of your co-founders, he talks a lot about this stuff, right? That like, yes, it is important. There's a place to analyze everything separately, but you also have to have the ability to take a step back and go like, is the tide rising for the whole business? Because these things are all interplay with one another.
Yeah, I mean, well, one, I completely agree. I would say the point of view with Good Day is like one massive educational experience from the Chubby's experience, and what Preston and Tom are attacking is the other big one, which is exactly what you talked about. Like CPMs and Facebook were going through the roof consistently for almost a decade. How do we reduce reliance on this thing that's making it really hard to be profitable? right? Literally move out of the digital environment into the real world environment and don't pay that tax anymore as a percentage of total was the answer. Now, what was pervasive and sneaky is that, okay, now you've just introduced the brand to like hundreds of thousands of more people who found them at the, Chubby's Wall at Dick's. Like, what does that person do the next season when they're thinking they want to get some fresh swimwear? I'll tell you, a large number of them go back to Dick's, and a really large number of them go back to Chubby's.com.
Yeah,
So
exactly, exactly.
both of those happen. Both of those happen like clockwork, and it is really like a win. That is the win-win of the wholesale channel. Now, the thing I always tell young brands as they're getting into more of these channels is more operational complexity means you need more time in the event that you're wrong, right?
For
You're going to take
sure.
on more complexity. You're just more likely to be incorrect about some things. It is more operationally challenging, etc. And like now you need the ability to be wrong, and it can't take down the whole ship. Like you need more capital to be able to be wrong from time to time as you
Totally.
start to layer on this risk. And so that whole strategy also needs to be aligned, right? Like, you're doing 20, 30 million in revenue in a Dick's Sporting Goods. You can't be burning your cash cycles down to zero in your off season to be able to
Totally.
fund that. So you have to really like look at the entire pie, top to bottom, and you have to incorporate all of these businesses, right? What we found is the B2B business was by far the most profit driving, right? Thing we could do incrementally after we had built a really successful e-commerce business. Now you get into the cash conversation and it's a little bit less clear,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, for sure.
I know this is good, right? But the cash cycles on that business aren't quite as tight, right? Because you're partnering with these retailers. And so you just have to make sure you're understanding each of those pieces. I tend to say both the systems and people, you need to make
Absolutely.
instantiated investments in allowing these business units to thrive independently, and that does require investment. It is not the mentality of just bolted on to my ecom business, bolted on is really, really dangerous. It's the only thing that I've consistently seen not work.
So, fast forward to today, right? You guys are building, continuously building at Good Day. You've got, I think, more than 50 brands you're working with now. Recently announced, what, a $7 million
7 million.
additional round of equity fundraising. What are some of the cool things that you guys have accomplished recently, and where are you headed with that fresh tranche of capital and that 50 plus brands that you're currently working with?
Yeah. So, well, one, I would say just thank you to all these brands that have built with us from day one. I mean, being a former brand operator, I take a lot of pride in building a lot of urgency to support these brands. And I would just say our brands are matching that and saying, hey, we're going to show you some cool stuff or some cool ideas. We think all of the brands can benefit from this. So we're just supercharging that like very cool cycle. We're really appreciative for these brands. Now, you can't ignore this like incredibly amazing last 60 days of like technology turning up to like an anxiety inducing fever pitch around around AI and like all that stuff, right? I've been talking with my team and also folks outside of Good Day. This is like opportunity driven anxiety. There's so much opportunity coming that people are having stress. That's actually the good form of anxiety, right? Now the question is, what do you do, right? So at Good Day, we're looking at the entire infrastructure. We have this incredibly wide product that's really complex. It houses the entire supply chain, items, POs, SOs, all of the inventory events, actions, etc. And now we can mobilize that data more simply than ever. We can expose our data and every action you would make inside of Good Day into Claude. This is actually in a month, we're going to be demoing this product at Shop Talk. I mean, Claude, review my 6,000 SKUs and tell me what my trouble SKUs are so that I can begin to work against those inventory positions. I mean, that's a pretty simple
Yeah,
question. That
for
doesn't
sure.
require an inventory analyst anymore. That's a one query. It will use all of Good Day's data to isolate that. And now you have this set of, 100 SKUs you need to build strategies against. You could also say, what is a good strategy? And it might say you need to discount products. It might say, hey, you're actually short on some really fast movers. And in that case, it would say, hey, you need to buy more of these 10 units. And you would say, cool, do it in Good Day. And it would literally write a PO back to Good Day. So like these systems, like we're getting to a place where these systems are just very powerful. The information's at your fingertips. You need to have good quality data that you trust go into these systems.
For
But man,
sure.
you're just going to be able to get a lot more done quickly in this world. So that's like first shoe to drop. That's like pretty much here in my mind at Good Day. we're here. The second shoe to drop is, okay, now can Good Day help me build autonomous agents that help me manage my business? And the answer to that's yes. We're in the product. There's a lot more going into that. To me, that's exactly where we're going. I think we're really well positioned to go do that. But you can't lose track of, like, you got to do the foundational work early.
For sure.
Our 50 brands that have committed to doing the foundational work when their team is going in and moving everything around has a great infrastructure to add more resources to, right? And that more
Definitely.
resources will be people, of course, and it'll also be some of these agents that are assisting them. And so that's the world that we're creating. That's why we're so excited. It's why we brought in more capital. I think that's why our brands are excited to build with us. To me, this is the true linking of, like, we are genuine former brand operators. We are looking at your exact pain points and saying, man, if I could get this agent to help them with this, that'd be pretty powerful, right? And
Heck
so
yeah.
we're getting in the trenches, and to me, this is a 2026 delivery window. And
For
it's not
sure.
just me, it's going to be others, right? Like and
Yep.
so on the brand side, I think the brands just have to be kind of like geared up for a lot of their day-to-day processes to evolve.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's the key, like what I love about what you guys are doing is you're building this system that not only has like the rich data repository to do some of this, AI driven or assisted analysis on, but also transactionally, you can push it back through the transaction infrastructure to go get those things done. Cut a PO, right? Get it to a vendor, get that received, and actually go get it sold to a customer, right? And so the interesting thing is like I don't know, I'm sure you guys have heard this ad nauseum, like SaaS is dead. I mean, maybe SaaS in its current form is it needs to evolve. I wouldn't say it's dead. I would say SaaS that is managing complex systems of data and governing disciplined business transactions that need to happen to run your business, right? Cutting POs, receiving and fulfilling sales orders. Those things don't go away. AI doesn't make that go away, right? But can AI enable that stuff to get done in a more streamlined manner, or even, I think more importantly, glean insights that take forever for a human to try to figure out, right? Or historically, you've had to pay a data scientist to extract that insight for you, right? So it's like, it's really the right SaaS with AI combined can be supercharged. It's the same thing with Free to Grow. Like we see it the same exact way. Like we help manage very complex systems of data, and we can now use AI to help us extract insights very quickly, come up with potential courses of action, but then we can bring in the human strategist, right? And say, let's model this out together and let's talk about the advantages and the drawbacks of going this way versus that way and the risks associated with doing this versus that. I actually see a place where we're going to get a lot more involved on the finance front is on the operations side of the businesses, right? Not that we're going to be cutting POs, but that we're going to be able to go further upstream faster to say, we see this result that we really don't like financially, and it's being caused by this subset of SKUs, right? And be able to get to that like insight very quickly and then start coming up with strategies to improve the financial outcome of how those SKUs are managed.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll share with you the way I talk to my team about it. And again, I'm not like sitting here doing some like analytical exercise that you don't have access to. This is me using my intuition as a multi-time entrepreneur. My intuition is that our opportunity pre this and post this went up by between 30 and 50% over.
For sure.
Well, 3 years ago, I set out with a like small group of people to go build this really special thing. And we were incredibly motivated and excited to go do it. Well, now overnight, that opportunity set has gone up by 30 to 50%. But newsflash, the way it's going to come together is completely different than you or anyone else was imagining. So you're going to
Yeah,
have to
yeah,
traverse,
exactly.
you're going to have to traverse quite a bit of like new thinking. That's everybody, right? And so the question will be, how well do we do that? And to me, at the end of the day, I don't think we should be talking, I think we should be talking about who's providing genuine value to merchants and
Yep.
what are they doing,
Yep.
right? Because if they're building technology, to me, you just described a lot of technology. It doesn't have anything to do with SaaS. It's a technological solution to driving value for these merchants to help them scale their business. If you're still doing that, the dollars I can charge merchants is just a function of how much value I can derive. And what I
100%.
know in my soul is that value just went up the potential value just went up pretty significantly. And so for us, it's driving a lot of urgency and a lot of speed to market. We're also using all of these tools, right? Like our engineers are end-to-end coding using all of these tools. So like our ability to drive value back to these merchants is even higher. So it's this like really cool virtuous cycle that we're operating in, and it's absolutely chaotic. It's chaotic exactly how you would imagine it is, right?
Yep. Yep.
But like no different than free to grow, like the center of our, focus is on actually solving complex merchant problems. And we have the depth of data and the domain knowledge to actually execute that. Now, I think there's gonna be a lot of people who try a lot of these things and it doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we just have to iterate through it.
100%. So I'm curious, like in talking about this apparel game, right, which has been the focus of this conversation, what final thoughts do you have for the brand founder who's listening on this particular topic? What's the most important thing you want them to take away from this conversation?
I think anytime a really like world-changing piece of technology shows up, you just have to commit to learning, and you should have zero time between the day you recognize that this is world-changing and you begin to learn. Every day is going to cost you. And so the only thing when I'm talking to entrepreneurs, and it's really easy to be kind of doomery about a lot of this stuff, right? Like there will absolutely be some level of job loss associated with this over the course of this year, in my opinion, right? Like easy to be doomery about, right? But like if you're an operator, you better be learning how to use these tools because your competitors' peers are going to be doing that. And we've already seeing that in coding and software. It's completely evolved how software works, right? Like to me, is that going to come to the operational people inside of brands? Absolutely. Zero doubt in my mind. Are you going to be able to build a brand more leanly and more profitably than you've ever even imagined? Absolutely.
Totally.
Absolutely. So like, man, I think there's a lot of opportunity in this. Even if I'm starting a brand from scratch today, I think with a very small team, you can operate at the leverage of a team of 30, 40, 50 people if you manage the business correctly and you have the right brand in the right moment. And so to me, it's just like a new wave of innovation and a new wave of opportunity. And the folks who will have a hard time in the future are the people who are ignoring it and trying to act like it's not there.
Yeah, for sure. I was listening to a podcast recently about AI and like the whole kind of like the crux of the conversation was like, listen, if you're freaking out about AI and you're learning about it every single day and you're just figuring out how to integrate it into your workflows, stop being afraid. You're the ones who are going to use it to figure out how to drive value and make money off of it. It's the large swath of the population that's just like not doing anything. They stand to be at pretty large risk of something potentially upending their ability to make money the way they know how to make money today. And so like my advice is like just get started and just use it where it makes sense, right? You don't like and just but don't stop. And over time that the value starts to compound and it just starts to become a way of life. And eventually one day using AI across all areas of life is just going to be a way of life. Like our kids and grandkids, I'm like, I think about that sometimes because I have 3 little kids. I'm like, what is my 3.5-year-old son going to be doing with AI when he's my age? It's going to be something crazy that I can't even fathom in
Yeah,
my
yeah.
brain
I'll,
right
I'll give
now.
you I'll give you a couple anecdotes because I think it's helpful to get like real examples. I was at an investor summit for 3 days last week with a very small group of really, really great multi-time entrepreneurs, some of whom have been inside of these large tech companies in the research labs, et cetera. One of them was talking about somebody had asked, should we have our kids learn how to code? I have a junior in high school. Should we be all about that, getting them to code? And the analogy you used that I found useful is like that would be being adamant about your kid learning Latin. It has utility. It's not going to have the utility for where we're going, right? So, like, I thought that was a really interesting mental model. But the other one that I want to share is just a real life personal. Like, I'm non technical. I'm the CEO of a software business, and this is a big deal for every software business. So, over the last 3 weeks, I've been building an AI chief of staff on Claudebot, and it's the most like captivating, interesting educational experience I can think of over the last 3 years. And two things are at play there. One, I'm committed to learning about it. And
Yeah.
that's really the driver here. It's not like I have a
Yep.
lot of extra time. I'm also raising 3 kids, right? But man, I'm just like fascinated too. It's fun and wild.
Yeah, it is wild.
Like, holy cow, three, I'm a startup. I have real resource constraints. I can't afford a person to go do that. So I'm building it with my extra hours, and I'm gonna get the leverage of that if it works, right? And so like that, man, I share that because I think it's like a really little tactical thing. It's like, okay, ask yourself, you're a startup, it's 10 people, and you feel like your arms are being stretched in every direction. You literally can't get to every email or every opportunity. It's like, well, are you thinking about the problem set right? Should you be thinking about getting leverage in more unique ways now that these tools are here? And so that's where like examples like that for me, I'm just like, just commit to the learning process right now.
Yeah, yeah,
Find
100%.
some one thing you're not getting done well and just experiment. It's totally fine if it fails. It's likely to fail, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But you'll learn a lot.
One more thing I'll say is that this podcast that I was listening to, like there was this one thought in there that like has just been going through my head every single day, and I'm thinking, where is this true for me? He's like, listen, pick the constraint, pick a constraint, and apply AI to that constraint. Like just when you do, you'll get leverage, right? Because systems, the theory of constraints says you apply resources to the bottleneck, you open that bottleneck up, and then what does it do? It shows you that there's a new bottleneck, and then you go apply resources there. So he's like, if you want to get excited about AI, it's like find a constraint that's driving you crazy and just start finding simple ways to apply AI to that constraint. And pretty soon you'll not just see the leverage, you'll get some momentum, and the momentum gives you energy, and the energy gets you going further into that thing, right? So that's what we're thinking about. We're going, what's the most annoying thing that we do when it comes to bookkeeping? We know exactly what it is, and for the last 4 weeks we have been applying AI to that constraint, and we are very close to unlocking this thing that used to take 4 hours taking about 15 minutes. And what's exciting about that is, yeah, is it saving us time? Yes. But you know what I'm really excited about? Our controllers on our team are like, yes, I don't have to spend 4 hours doing that for every client anymore. And you know what they're excited about doing instead is actually reviewing and analyzing the end result of the financials a bit more, applying their brain to something that is not only more valuable to our clients, but is more valuable to them. They're more excited. So that then breeds energy inside of their job, and it starts building momentum for them. And so that's the exciting thing, is when you really do use it to like, you apply AI to your constraints are probably the things that are actually annoying you the most and actually pulling your energy down and the people in your business. And so you can actually unlock great human capital, great human potential by applying AI to your constraints.
100%. And the reason to be reluctant is that you're stepping into a world of unknown and you don't know if it will work, right? And it's easy to be fearful of being wrong or off. And so I would just say, if you find yourself, if there's 100 people, my instincts would be probably 70% of them aren't even trying to learn. So
For
be in
sure.
the 30% that are leaning into it early and are getting that flywheel going, right? Like remember this, like any other technological advance is going to have a compounding nature to it. The earlier you start, the more you compound, the more you compound and compound and compound. So just like getting an early start on this, I do think is pretty important for every startup, not just brands. And in giving yourself the grace to be wrong. I mean,
Yeah.
man, like just let your like OCD perfectionist self just like fade into the background and get out there and try this. And just know that it's a two-way door. If you get out there and you don't like it, stop. Right?
100%. 100%. Well, man, this is a fascinating conversation. Didn't see it taking a turn and ending with a conversation about AI, but this was super insightful, man. I appreciate you coming back on the podcast. I'm excited for what you guys are doing at Good Day. In fact, I was just interviewing one of our mutual clients. He's one of the founders is coming on the show, and that episode will be out a few weeks from now. And he uses Good Day, and he was telling me at the end of that conversation how Good Day has been a life changer for them and really, really helped them with scaling their apparel brand. So thanks again for coming on, man. Where can people find more information about you and Good Day?
Yeah, absolutely. The easiest place they'll have the most comprehensive information is just www.gooddaysoftware.com. You can also follow me on LinkedIn. It's just khensey6. And I'm doing my best to put everything I'm learning out into the open for everybody to get benefit.
Well, thanks again for coming on the show, man. This has been an amazing conversation, and maybe we can do a three-peat sometime soon.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
All right, man. Have a
Thank
good
you.
day.
All right. Love it.
Don't forget, if you like today's episode, please hit the subscribe button and leave us a review. It helps us reach more people like you. Also, if you want daily tips on scaling a profitable D2C brand, follow me, John Blair, on LinkedIn. And if you're interested in learning more about how Free to Grow CFO can help your brand increase profit and cash flow as you scale, check us out at freetogrowcfo.com.